Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're zooming out, way out.
We really are.
Yeah. We're looking at a force that is arguably one of the biggest shapers of the human experience, but uh, usually we only talk about it when it's a flashpoint in the news. Border crisis, a visa debate, things like that. We're talking about migration.
Right.
But we aren't just looking at people moving from point A to point B today. We're looking at migration as this massive transformative mechanic that literally reshapes the map around us.
It's great to be back. And you hit on the core problem right away. We tend to view migration as these isolated, often chaotic events.
Yeah, totally.
But if you look at the source material we're digging into today, specifically, we're using the global tapestry and some core concepts from AP Human Geography. The picture is much more structural. Migration isn't just an event. It's an engine.
An engine.
Yeah, it's a machine that runs in the background of civilization.
The source material actually calls it a transformative force. And that's what hooked me. We always hear about the people moving, but we rarely look at the hidden mechanics of how that movement changes the container itself.
Exactly.
We're talking about shifting political power, rewiring the global economy to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, and completely blending or sometimes breaking cultural fabrics.
And that is the mission for this deep dive. We want to unpack those three major ripple effects.
Political, economic, and cultural.
Right. We're going to see how moving bodies shifts legislative seats, how it plugs labor gaps while creating entirely new dependencies, and how it diffuses culture in ways that change what we eat, speak, and believe.
And just to set the context for you listening, this isn't an opinion piece. This is based on data-driven concepts regarding the effects of migration. We are looking at how geographers and sociologists actually track these changes. So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
The first big bucket in the source material is politics.
The political effects. Now, this is often the most contentious area, but geographers look at it through the lens of power distribution.
I dubbed this section in my notes the body count of power.
Ooh, okay.
Which sounds a little dramatic, I know, but when you read the source, it's literally true. In many systems where people live determines who holds the reins.
It's not dramatic at all. It's mathematically accurate. In representative democracies, political power is tethered to population density.
Right.
You move the people, you move the power. And the source material highlights the United States as a primary example of this phenomenon, specifically regarding the House of Representatives.
To walk us through this, because I think most people assume political maps are just, fixed. Like the state lines are drawn, the number of reps is set, and that's it.
Far from it. The map is alive. One of the most fascinating case studies in the text is the Sun Belt migration.
Okay.
This happened roughly between 1950 and 1980.
This is the massive shift from the north to the south.
Correct. You had a wholesale movement of families and workers leaving the colder, industrial northern regions, what we eventually started calling the Rust Belt, and heading to the south and southwest.
Wow.
Now, the interesting part isn't just that they moved, but why they moved. The source lists three specific catalysts. First, obviously, the search for jobs as industrial sectors shifted.
Makes sense.
Second, the expansion of the interstate highway system, which made physical relocation feasible for the average family.
Right, that highway system is key because suddenly moving across the country didn't mean never seeing your family again. It made the distance manageable. But the third reason listed, this was my favorite detail in the whole section.
Oh, yeah. The widespread adoption of air conditioning.
Air conditioning, I love that. We think of AC as just comfort, a luxury so you don't sweat through your shirt.
Yeah.
But here, the source is presenting it as a geopolitical tool.
It really was. Without AC, you simply don't get massive populations living in Arizona, Florida, or Texas year-round. It's a piece of technology that unlocked geography.
That's a great way to put it.
Before affordable AC, those environments were considered hostile for mass industrial productivity. It made those regions habitable for a mass workforce. But here is the political kicker.
Yeah.
When those bodies moved south, the legislative seats followed them.
Because representation is based on the census.
Exactly. As the North emptied out and the South filled up, the North lost seats in the House, and the southern states gained them. This wasn't just a change in address, it was a transfer of political influence.
So literally, the invention of the AC unit helped shift the balance of political power in America toward the southern states. That is wild to think about.
It shifted the center of gravity for American politics. Now, that's the internal power shift. But then you have to look at the reaction to migration.
Right.
The source talks extensively about how governments respond when migration happens rapidly.
Yeah, the reactionary side. I call this social twitchiness in my notes. It seems like whenever there's a big influx of new people, the existing population gets nervous and the government steps in with laws to throttle the flow.
That is a pattern we see repeated throughout history. The source brings up a very stark, specific example, the Chinese Exclusion Act in the 19th century.
This was the late 1800s in the U.S.
Yes, context is key here. And just to be clear, we're simply reporting what the text outlines regarding the economic impact of this policy.
Of course.
Chinese immigrants were arriving in large numbers, primarily to work on the Transcontinental Railroad and mining.
Hard labor.
Very hard labor. They were building the literal backbone of the American industrial economy. But this rapid demographic change sparked intense resentment among the native-born population in the West.
And the result wasn't just a please slow down sign.
Yeah.
It was a full-on ban.
It was. Congress passed the act to halt Chinese immigration effectively for a decade, which was later extended. But here is where it gets really interesting and ironic from an economic perspective based on the source material.
Okay.
By passing this law, the U.S. restricted its own labor supply. They removed a vital source of manpower that was needed for industrial projects.
So the political reaction actually sabotaged the economic need. It's like shooting yourself in the foot because you don't like the shoes you're wearing.
That's a colorful analogy, but yes. It highlights the tension between political sentiment and economic reality. Politics often reacts to fear or cultural friction, while the economy just wants workers.
Right.
And that tension spills over into international diplomacy, too. Migration forces nations to talk to each other.
It forces the conversation. You can't ignore your neighbor if people are constantly hopping the fence. Or, more accurately, if you need people to hop the fence to work for you.
Exactly. Whether it's managing refugee crises, setting up desk worker programs, or disputes over border controls, migration is a constant high-stakes agenda item. It binds countries together in a complex web of negotiation.
Which actually creates a perfect segue into the next massive ripple effect. We've seen how it moves votes and laws. Now let's look at the engine itself, the economy.
The primary driver of movement.
Right. We established that people move for jobs. That's the headline.
Yeah.
But the source material breaks this down into two distinct perspectives.
Yeah.
The destination country, where they're going, and the origin country, where they're coming from.
Let's start with the destination.
Yeah, let's do that.
From the destination perspective, it's all about labor gaps. Immigrants often fill the roles that native-born workers avoid or have moved away from. The source explicitly mentions sectors like agriculture and construction.
Which we see all the time. But there's another layer to this that I found really compelling, especially for developed nations. The aging problem. This felt like a bit of a wake-up call in the text.
It is critical. If you look at the demographics of many developed nations, Japan, parts of Europe, even the U.S. to an extent, the birth rates are falling. The population is getting older.
Yeah.
You have a shrinking workforce trying to support a growing number of retirees.
This is the dependency ratio issue, right?
Yeah.
Who pays for the social safety nets? Who pays for Social Security if there are no workers paying payroll taxes?
Exactly. That's where migration becomes mathematically essential. It's not just about filling jobs. It's about sustaining the social contract.
Wow.
Immigrants tend to be younger. They inject youth and vitality into an aging economic demographic. They provide the tax base needed to keep those pension systems from collapsing.
It's interesting because usually the rhetoric we hear is that immigrants take resources or burden the system. But this perspective flips it completely. They are actually propping up the systems for the elderly native population.
In many aging economies, yes, that is the functional reality outlined in the data. And it's not just about maintenance, it's about growth. Look at urbanization. The source mentions China's internal migration, millions moving from rural areas to cities.
The largest migration in human history, right?
By numbers, yes. This explosion of human capital stimulates city growth. It demands entirely new service industries, housing, infrastructure. It turns a town into a metropolis.
Okay, so that's the destination. They get labor, they get taxes, they get growth.
Yeah.
But what about the folks left behind? Let's flip the coin and look at the origin perspective. And I have to drop a number here because it completely blew my mind.
You're looking at the remittance figure.
Yes, I am. $766 billion. That is the amount of money transferred globally in remittances in 2022, according to the source.
It's a staggering number.
Just to define it clearly for everyone listening, remittances are when a worker goes abroad, makes money, and sends a portion of it back home to their family. $766 billion. That is not pocket change.
Not at all.
That is larger than the GDP of a mid-sized country. That's more than the GDP of Switzerland or Argentina.
It is huge, and the impact on the origin countries is profound. The source explains that this isn't just money for groceries. In places like rural Mexico or parts of Southeast Asia, these funds are vital capital.
Yeah.
They're used to build infrastructure, improve housing, pay for education, and generally raise the standard of living for the entire community.
So in a way, the migrant is acting like an external investor for their hometown. They are a one-person foreign aid department.
Precisely. It's foreign direct investment at the micro level. But there is always but in geography, we have to look at the cost to the origin country. You can't just export your people without consequence.
The brain drain.
Right. If the people leaving are your engineers, your doctors, your most skilled technicians, that leads to economic stagnation at home. You can't build a robust local economy if your best talent is building someone else's.
But the source offers a counterpoint to that, doesn't it? It wasn't entirely negative.
It does offer nuance. It suggests that if those migrants were unemployed or underemployed before they left, their departure might actually be a net positive.
Alpha so.
It relieves pressure on the local labor market and opens up opportunities for those who stay behind. So it's not always a simple loss. It depends on who is leaving and what the job market looked like before they left.
It's a balancing act. You lose the person, but you get the capital back in remittances.
Yeah.
It's a trade-off.
Everything in migration is a trade-off. There are rarely perfect solutions, only exchanges.
Which brings us to the third ripple effect. We've done politics, the power shifts. We've done economics, the money and labor. Now we have to talk about the human stuff, the culture.
The cultural effects are often the most visible in our day-to-day lives. This is about diffusion.
I call this the flavor of migration. The source talks about how moving people moves culture. It's not just bodies, it's recipes, it's language, it's music. It's the software of humanity.
Language is a great place to start because it's so measurable. The source cites a very specific statistic. 75% of American high school students who study a foreign language choose Spanish.
75%. That is massive dominance.
And it's a direct result of the large Spanish-speaking immigrant population in the U.S. The demographic reality shapes the educational choices of the native population. You learn the language of your neighbors. It's a practical adaptation.
And it's not just homework. It's what we watch and eat. The source mentions the diffusion of Indian cuisine and Bollywood. You see this in the UK and the US heavily. I mean, chicken tikka masala is basically a national dish in Britain now.
It really is, and that diffusion happens most intensely in what geographers call ethnic enclaves.
Like Chinatown.
Exactly. Chinatowns in San Francisco or London or Little Italy in New York. These are distinct neighborhoods where migrants cluster. They create a multicultural social fabric where traditions are preserved but also accessible to the wider public.
Right.
It's where the blending happens. It's where you go to get authentic food, but it's also a support network for the new arrivals.
But I feel like I'm the bearer of bad news today.
Right.
It's not always a smooth blend, right? The source talks about friction points. It's not always a fun food festival.
It does. Cultural blending is rarely seamless. The source notes that migration often triggers intense debates over integration. It specifically mentions the ongoing discussions in Europe regarding Muslim immigrant communities.
Right, the debates about secularism versus tradition. And again, just looking at what the textbook outlines here.
Exactly. We're just looking at the geographic tension points. When you have different cultural values living side by side, you get tension. Questions arise about how much the newcomers should adapt versus how much the host society should accommodate. These are not easy questions to answer.
And these cultural tensions often feed right back into the political bucket we started with.
It is a feedback loop. The culture causes the tension, which causes the political reaction like the laws or quotas, which then affects the economic policy.
There is one more cultural effect the source mentioned that I found really poignant. We talked about the $766 billion in remittances, which sounds great on a spreadsheet, but there's a personal cost attached to that check.
Yes. The impact on family structure. This is the most human element of the data, and frankly, the saddest.
The source notes that often it's a parent, frequently the father, who migrates to find work.
And while that act provides financial stability through remittances, the physical absence fractures the family unit. You have children growing up without that parent. You have fragmented homes in the country of origin.
So the trade-off is literal. You trade financial poverty for emotional or familial strain. You get the new roof of the house, but dad isn't living under it.
That is the harsh reality of the trade-off, and it's why we can't just look at the economic numbers in isolation. You have to look at the sociological impact. The cost of migration isn't just the plane ticket. It's often a generation growing up with a gap in the family photo.
Wow. Yeah, that's heavy. So we've unpacked the three buckets. Politics, which is power shifts, redistricting, and exclusionary laws. Economics, which is labor gaps, the aging crisis, and massive money transfers. And culture, which is language diffusion, integration tension, and family cost.
It's a comprehensive look at the machinery.
So I have to ask the question we always ask. So what? Why does this matter? Why do we need to analyze this like geographers? Why can't we just read the headlines and move on?
Because geography isn't just trivia, it's a tool for management. If you understand these mechanics, you can plan for them.
Give me an example.
Take urban planning. If we know migration is driving urbanization, we need to design cities that can handle that growth. Housing, transit, sanitation. If we ignore the why and where of migration, our cities collapse under the pressure.
And labor markets.
Same thing. We need to predict where workers are needed. If we know a population is aging, like we discussed, we know we will have a labor shortage. We can't be surprised by it. We have to plan our immigration policies to match our economic reality rather than just reacting emotionally to cultural changes.
And I guess on the cultural front, understanding the tensions helps us manage them.
Ideally, yes. If we understand that social cohesion is tested by rapid demographic shifts, we can work on integration strategies rather than just letting resentment fester. It's about being proactive instead of reactive. It's about seeing the board.
That makes total sense. The final takeaway really seems to be that migration is a system of exchange. Destination countries get labor and diversity, but they face integration challenges. Origin countries get capital, but they face brain drain and family fragmentation. There are no free lunches here.
It's a complex ledger, debits and credits on both sides.
Which leads me to a thought I've been mulling over since I read the section on aging populations.
Oh, here we go. What's the theory?
Well, if we look at the trajectory, we establish that migration is often driven by labor shortages and aging populations in destination countries.
Right, the aging problem.
Well, populations are aging faster than ever, not just in the West, but in places like China, too. The whole world is getting older.
So the labor shortage is going to get worse.
Exactly. So are we approaching a future where nations explicitly compete to attract migrants rather than restrict them? If labor becomes the scarcest resource, does the dynamic of the laws we discussed, like the Exclusion Acts, flip on its head? Do we see a world where countries are fighting to get people in rather than keep them out?
That is a fascinating flip. Instead of building walls, you're rolling out red carpets because you literally can't run your economy without them.
It feels like the data points that way.
It's a possibility the data suggests we should strongly consider. The 21st century might be the century of the global war for talent, not just for doctors, but for anyone willing to work.
That is a heavy thought to end on. The global competition for the worker.
It changes the whole map.
It certainly does. Well, thank you for walking us through the tapestry today. It's definitely changed how I'm going to look at the next help wanted sign I see.
It was a pleasure.
And to you listening, thanks for diving deep with us. As you walk around your own city or town this week, try to look at it through this lens. Look for the flows of culture, the labor, the history. You might realize your local neighborhood is a lot more connected to the rest of the world than you thought. Catch you next time.